Detective Alex Sullivan stared at his phone for the 100th time that day. No new messages. He scrolled back through his text conversation with Vanessa, reading their last exchange from 3 weeks ago. The final message was hers. "Please stop contacting me. It's over." Alex tossed his phone onto the passenger seat of his unmarked police car and rubbed his tired eyes. The dashboard clock read 2:17 a.m. He wasn't even on duty. Yet here he was, parked across the street from Vanessa's apartment building, just like he'd been doing several nights a week since their breakup. "Just one more time," he whispered to himself, starting the car engine. "I just need to talk to her one more time." The relationship had lasted 3 years. 3 years of what Alex thought was happiness, stability, a future. Until 2 months ago, when Vanessa had ended things without warning. At least that's how it felt to him. In reality, there had been signs for months. Arguments about his work hours, his controlling behavior, his refusal to discuss their problems. Alex drove slowly past her apartment, eyes scanning the windows on the 3rd floor. The lights were off. He wondered if she was asleep alone or if someone else was there with her. The thought made his stomach twist painfully. The next morning, Alex arrived at the police station 30 minutes late. His partner, Hector, looked up from his desk with concern in his eyes. "You look like hell," Hector said, pushing a cup of coffee toward him. "Everything okay?" Alex grunted in response, taking the coffee without making eye contact. They'd been partners for 5 years, and Hector knew him better than most. He'd watched Alex's downward spiral since the breakup with growing worry. "The lieutenant wants to see you," Hector added quietly. "Something about your performance review." Alex nodded absently and headed toward Lieutenant Rivera's office, ignoring the glances from other officers. He knew what they were thinking. He'd heard the whispers. Detective Sullivan losing his edge. Detective Sullivan becoming unreliable. "Close the door," Lieutenant Rivera said when Alex entered. She didn't look up from the file she was reading, his file. "Sit down." Alex sat, his uniform shirt wrinkled from being pulled from the laundry basket that morning. The lieutenant finally looked up, her expression a mixture of disappointment and concern. "Your last 3 reports were sloppy. You've been late 4 times this month. And I've had a complaint from records that you've been accessing civilian files without case numbers attached." She leaned forward. "What's going on with you, Sullivan?" Alex stared at a point just over her shoulder. "Nothing. Just been having trouble sleeping." "Is this about Vanessa?" The sound of her name from someone else's mouth made Alex's jaw clench. "No," Lieutenant Rivera sighed. "Look, breakups are tough, I get it. But you're a police officer. You need to keep your personal life separate from your work." She closed his file. "I'm giving you a warning. Get it together, or I'll have to take official action." Alex nodded stiffly and left the office. Back at his desk, he ignored Hector's questioning look and opened his laptop. Within minutes, he'd typed Vanessa's name into the department database, just as he'd done dozens of times before. Her address, phone number, work information, all of it appeared on his screen. What was new was the notification on her file. Restraining order filed, pending approval. Alex felt like he'd been punched in the gut. A restraining order? Against him? His hands trembled as he closed the laptop. She couldn't do this to him. They just needed to talk. If they could just talk, she'd understand. Across town, Vanessa Lynn stepped out of the courthouse, a thin folder clutched in her hand. The temporary restraining order had been granted. She should have felt relieved, but instead, a new kind of fear settled in her chest. How would Alex react when he found out? "You did the right thing," her friend Tanya said, walking beside her. "That guy was getting scary." Vanessa nodded, thinking about the late-night calls, the texts, the times she'd spotted his car outside her apartment or workplace. "I just hope it works." "If it doesn't, we'll figure something else out," Tanya assured her. "Want to grab lunch? That new place on Main Street opened last week." The cafe was crowded but warm, a welcome distraction from the morning's stress. They found a small table near the window, and Vanessa tried to focus on the menu instead of constantly checking over her shoulder. "This isn't living," Tanya said softly. "You can't keep jumping at every sound." I know, Vanessa replied. I'm trying. As they waited for their food, Vanessa noticed a man at the counter talking to the barista. He was tall with broad shoulders, dressed in a crisp button-down shirt and dark jeans, professional but casual. There was something steady about him, the calm way he spoke, how he smiled easily at the staff. When he turned, coffee in hand, he caught Vanessa looking at him. Instead of the quick, awkward glance away that usually happens in such moments, he smiled briefly, a simple acknowledgement, before heading to a table with his laptop. He's cute, Tanya whispered, following Vanessa's gaze. Stop it, Vanessa said, but she couldn't help the small smile that tugged at her lips, the first genuine one in weeks. After lunch, as they were preparing to leave, Vanessa accidentally bumped into the man while reaching for her coat. Sorry, she said automatically. No problem, he replied. His voice was deep and pleasant. Crowded in here. That might have been the end of it, except that Vanessa's phone chose that moment to ring, and Alex's name flashed on the screen. Her face must have changed because the stranger's expression shifted from polite to concerned. Everything okay? He asked. Vanessa silenced the phone with shaking hands. Yes, fine, just someone I don't want to talk to. He nodded, understanding without pressing. Been there. He held out his hand. I'm Nick, by the way. Vanessa, she replied, shaking his hand. And this is my friend Tanya. Nick smiled at them both. Nice to meet you. I'm new in town, just transferred for work. Any recommendations for good dinner spots that aren't too crowded? The conversation flowed easily after that. Nick was from Chicago, recently moved for a job that he described vaguely as federal investigations. He listened more than he spoke, seeming genuinely interested in their local recommendations. When Vanessa's phone buzzed with a text, Alex again, Nick noticed her discomfort. Former relationship? He asked carefully. Vanessa hesitated, then nodded. He's having trouble accepting it's over. That sounds challenging, Nick said, his tone neutral but sympathetic. If you ever need. Well, I know what it's like to be new somewhere with few connections. Sometimes talking to someone with no history in the situation helps. He wrote his number on a napkin and slid it across the table. No pressure, just if you need a friendly ear. After Nick left, Tanya raised her eyebrows. Well, that was interesting. It's not like that, Vanessa protested. He was just being nice. Maybe, Tanya conceded, but nice is a good start. Later that evening, as Vanessa prepared dinner in her apartment, her phone rang again. Alex's number. She ignored it, but the voicemail notification made her stomach twist. Against her better judgment, she listened. Vanessa, we need to talk about this restraining order. Alex's voice was low, controlled, but with an edge that made her shiver. You know I would never hurt you. I just want to talk. Please call me back. She deleted the message and double-checked her locks. As she tried to focus on cooking, her mind kept drifting to the strange mix of fear and exhaustion that had become her daily reality. But for the first time in weeks, another thought competed for space. The memory of a genuine smile, a hand, extended in simple friendship, and the possibility that life could eventually return to normal. In his car outside, Alex watched Vanessa's silhouette move past her kitchen window. His phone sat in his lap, the call log showing his 5 attempts to reach her today. He told himself he just needed to explain, to make her understand they belonged together. He ignored the small voice in his head telling him this wasn't love anymore. It was something darker, something consuming him from the inside out. What he didn't know was how quickly everything was about to change, and that the new man Vanessa had just met would soon become much more than a friendly stranger in a coffee shop. Alex sat in the dimly lit bar nursing his third whiskey. The bartender had stopped making conversation after Alex's terse responses made it clear he wasn't interested in small talk. The baseball game played on the TV above, but Alex wasn't watching. His phone lay on the bar, screen up, waiting for a call or text that wouldn't come. It had been 2 weeks since he discovered the restraining order. 2 weeks of following the legal requirement to stay away from Vanessa's home and workplace. But that didn't stop him from thinking about her constantly. imagining what she was doing, who she was with. His phone lit up with a text, and his heart jumped, until he saw it was just Hector checking in on him. "You good? Haven't heard from you this weekend." Alex didn't reply. Instead, he opened his social media app and went to Vanessa's profile. She rarely posted anymore, but her friend Tanya had tagged her in a photo yesterday. Alex tapped on it, and his blood ran cold. There she was, smiling, sitting at a restaurant table. And across from her was a man Alex didn't recognize. They weren't touching or being overtly romantic, but the way they leaned toward each other, the easy comfort in their expressions, Alex knew this was more than a friendly dinner. "Another?" the bartender asked, pointing to his empty glass. Alex nodded, unable to take his eyes off the photo. Who was this guy? How long had Vanessa known him? The questions burned in his mind as the fresh drink appeared in front of him. The next morning, Alex arrived at work early for the first time in weeks. He needed the quiet of the nearly empty station. After checking that no one was paying attention, he opened the department database and typed in what little information he had. Male, approximately 30-35 years old, first name possibly Nick or Nicholas based on the photo caption, recently moved to town. The search returned too many results to be useful. Alex drummed his fingers on the desk, thinking. Vanessa worked at the county courthouse as a legal assistant. The guy in the photo looked professional. Maybe he was a lawyer or someone else connected to the courts. He refined his search parameters, adding courthouse employees, recent transfers, legal professionals. Still too many results. Early start today. Lieutenant Rivera's voice made Alex jump. He quickly closed the database window. "Just catching up on some paperwork," he said, trying to sound casual. She studied him for a moment. "Good. The Miller case needs your attention. Hector's on his way in." As she walked away, Alex felt a twinge of guilt. He was using police resources for personal reasons. Again. But the need to know about this man outweighed any professional ethics. He'd be more careful next time. Across town, Vanessa woke up feeling lighter than she had in months. She reached for her phone and smiled at the good morning text from Nick. Their dinner the night before had been wonderful. Easy conversation, genuine laughter, and not once had she felt the need to check over her shoulder. "How about a hike this weekend?" His message read. "Weather's supposed to be perfect." She texted back an enthusiastic yes before getting ready for work. As she applied her makeup, she caught herself smiling at her reflection, something that hadn't happened in a long time. At the courthouse, Vanessa greeted her co-workers with more energy than usual. Even her boss noticed. "Someone's in a good mood," he commented as she handed him his coffee. "Just slept well," Vanessa replied, not ready to share about Nick with anyone but Tanya. Around lunchtime, her phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Thinking it might be Nick calling from a work phone, she answered. "Hello?" Silence, then the sound of someone breathing. "Hello?" She repeated, unease creeping up her spine. The call disconnected. Vanessa stared at her phone, the good feeling from the morning evaporating. It was probably nothing, a wrong number, a telemarketer, but she couldn't shake the feeling that it was Alex. Nick called her that evening from his actual number, and hearing his voice helped calm her nerves. "How was your day?" he asked. "Good, mostly," she said, settling onto her couch. "Got a weird call that spooked me a bit." "Weird how?" She explained about the silent call, adding, "It's probably nothing, but with everything that's happened with my ex." Nick's voice grew serious. "Have there been other calls like this?" "Not exactly, but he's been persistent since we broke up. I had to get a restraining order." There was a pause before Nick spoke again. "That sounds scary. Do you feel safe in your apartment?" The question took her by surprise. Most people minimized her concerns or offered empty reassurances. Nick's straightforward acknowledgement of potential danger was refreshingly honest. "Most of the time," she admitted. "I've changed my locks and added a security chain." "Good steps," he said approvingly. "Would it help if I gave you some additional security tips? It's kind of part of my job." They spent the next half hour discussing simple security measures she could implement. Nick never made her feel foolish for being afraid, and his practical advice gave her a sense of regaining control. "Thank you," she said finally, "for taking this seriously." "Of course," he replied simply. "Everyone deserves to feel safe." After they hung up, Vanessa realized she still knew very little about Nick's job beyond vague references to federal investigations. But somehow, that didn't bother her. He was respectful of her boundaries, and she appreciated that he didn't push for details about her situation either. Meanwhile, Alex had spent the day in a fog of anger and jealousy. The image of Vanessa smiling at another man played on repeat in his mind. During his lunch break, he'd made the impulsive decision to call her from a payphone near the station. Hearing her voice had sent a jolt through him, but he couldn't bring himself to speak. After his shift, he headed straight to another bar, different from the night before. The bartender here knew him by name and started pouring his usual without asking. "Rough day?" she asked, sliding the drink toward him. "You could say that," Alex muttered. 3 drinks in, he pulled out his phone and started typing a text to Vanessa. He deleted and rewrote it several times before hitting send. "I saw the picture. Who is he?" The violation of the restraining order was blatant, but Alex was beyond caring. He stared at his phone, waiting for a response that didn't come. After 20 minutes, he called her number only to be sent straight to voicemail. "You can't just replace me," he slurred into the phone. "We were together for 3 years. 3 years. And now you're out having dinner with some guy? Does he know you like I do? Does he know what you need?" He hung up and ordered another drink, ignoring the concerned look from the bartender. By closing time, he was barely able to call a rideshare to take him home. The next morning, Alex woke to a pounding headache and the fuzzy memory of his drunk calls and texts. He checked his phone with dread and found a new email notification from the courthouse, an amendment to the restraining order, citing his communications from the night before. "There would be a hearing next week, damn it," he shouted, throwing his phone across the room. He called in sick to work, unable to face Hector or Lieutenant Rivera. Instead, he spent the day alternating between self-pity and rage, convincing himself that Vanessa was deliberately trying to ruin his life, his career. By evening, his focus had shifted to the unknown man in the photo. If Alex could just find out who he was, maybe he could understand what Vanessa saw in him. Maybe there was something Alex could use, some leverage. He drove to the station after hours, nodding to the night shift officers as he headed to his desk. No one questioned why he was there despite calling in sick. Detectives often kept odd hours. This time, Alex was thorough in his search. He cross-referenced court schedules, recent case filings, and new employee records. He checked state bar registrations for new attorneys and scanned local business licenses for recent changes. Nothing fit the little he knew about this Nick. Frustrated, he widened his search to include federal employees recently assigned to local offices. A list of names appeared, mostly Border Patrol and DEA agents. This close to the state line, federal presence was common, and then he saw it. Nicholas Chen, transferred to the local FBI field office 3 weeks ago. Alex clicked on the file, but most of the information was classified, requiring higher security clearance than he possessed. An FBI agent. Vanessa was dating an FBI agent. Alex sat back in his chair, a cold feeling spreading through his chest. This wasn't some random guy he could intimidate. This was someone with training, resources, connections, someone who could cause real problems for a local detective with disciplinary issues. For the first time, Alex felt truly threatened. The restraining order was one thing, embarrassing but manageable. But if this FBI agent decided Alex was a problem, his phone buzzed with a text from Lieutenant Rivera. "My office. AM tomorrow. Non-negotiable." Alex stared at the message, then back at the screen with the limited information about Nicholas Chen. FBI. Everything was unraveling faster than he could control. The rational part of his brain, the part that had once made him a good detective, knew he should back off. Get professional help, save what was left of his career, but the other part, the part consumed by obsession and wounded pride, was already formulating a new plan. If he couldn't intimidate Nick, maybe he could find dirt on him. And if not, he could still confront Vanessa one last time. Make her understand what she was throwing away. As he left the station, Alex didn't notice the security camera that had recorded his unauthorized database searches, nor did he see the overnight supervisor making a note of his unusual after-hours visit while on sick leave. The wheels were already in motion for a collision. None of them could predict. The digital clock on Lieutenant Rivera's desk showed 8:17 a.m. Alex sat across from her, his uniform wrinkled and his eyes bloodshot. He hadn't slept much after discovering that Vanessa's new boyfriend was an FBI agent. "Do you understand the severity of what's happening here, Sullivan?" Lieutenant Rivera's voice was calm but firm. "Unauthorized database searches, violation of a restraining order, showing up at the station while on sick leave." "I was just checking on a case," Alex interrupted. "At midnight? After calling in sick?" She slid a folder across the desk. "And what case exactly required you to look up FBI personnel records?" Alex's stomach dropped. He hadn't been careful enough. "I'm placing you on administrative leave effective immediately," she continued. "You'll surrender your badge and service weapon pending a full investigation." "You can't do this," Alex protested weakly. "I can and I am. This isn't just about department rules anymore. Your behavior has crossed into potentially criminal territory." Her expression softened slightly. "Get some help, Alex. Whatever's going on with you, this isn't the way to handle it." 20 minutes later, Alex walked out of the station, his gun and badge left behind. The morning sun felt too bright, the world moving too fast around him. Officers he'd worked with for years averted their eyes as he passed. Only Hector approached him in the parking lot. "Let me drive you home," he offered. Alex shook his head. "I got it. Look, man, I know things have been rough." "But I said I got it," Alex snapped, getting into his car and slamming the door. He drove aimlessly for hours, replaying the meeting in his mind. Administrative leave, investigation, possible criminal charges. His career was imploding, and for what? Because Vanessa had moved on. Eventually, he ended up at a liquor store, where he bought a bottle of whiskey, then drove to his apartment. The place was a mess. Unwashed dishes piled in the sink, takeout containers scattered across the coffee table, laundry spilling out of the hamper. He hadn't properly cleaned since the breakup. Alex poured a generous drink and collapsed onto his couch. His phone buzzed with text messages from concerned colleagues, but he ignored them. Instead, he opened social media and went to Vanessa's profile again. She had posted nothing new, but the photo with Nick still burned in his vision. He clicked on Nick's tagged profile, but it was mostly private, just a profile picture and a few public posts about hiking and local events. Nothing personal, nothing revealing. An FBI agent. The thought circled in Alex's mind like a shark. Was that why Vanessa had left him? Had she been seeing Nick while they were still together? The whiskey went down too easily, and soon Alex's thoughts grew darker and more paranoid. Maybe Nick was investigating him. Maybe Vanessa had told Nick all of Alex's secrets, his mistakes on the job, the times he'd bent the rules. Maybe they were laughing about him together. By evening, the bottle was half empty and Alex had worked himself into a state of drunken rage. He picked up his phone and dialed Vanessa's number, forgetting or no longer caring about the restraining order. The call went straight to voicemail. "You think you can just ruin my life?" He slurred into the phone. "Get me suspended? Turn my own department against me? You and your fed boyfriend think you're so much better than me? I gave you everything and this is how you repay me?" He hung up and immediately called again, leaving another rambling, angry message. Then another, and another. Across town, Vanessa and Nick were having dinner at an upscale restaurant. Her phone turned off and tucked away in her purse. The past few weeks with Nick had been a revelation, showing her what a healthy relationship could feel like. He was attentive without being possessive, strong without being domineering, interested in her thoughts and feelings without judgment. "I have something to tell you," Nick said after they'd ordered dessert. His expression was serious. Vanessa felt a flutter of anxiety. In her experience, those words rarely preceded good news. "What is it?" she asked cautiously. Nick took a deep breath. "I haven't been completely honest with you about my job." She waited, her mind racing with possibilities. "I am in federal law enforcement, but I've been vague about the details." He met her eyes directly. "I work for the FBI. I'm an agent with the Organized Crime Task Force." Vanessa blinked, surprised but not upset. "Why didn't you just tell me that from the beginning?" "Professional habit," he explained with a small smile. "We're trained to be careful about revealing our positions, especially when meeting new people. It's not just about personal safety. Sometimes it affects ongoing investigations if word gets out about who we are." She nodded slowly. "That makes sense. I appreciate you telling me now." "There's more," Nick continued. "I've been assigned to a case tracking money laundering through local businesses. It's why I moved here. The work can be unpredictable and sometimes dangerous. Before we go any further, I wanted you to know what you'd be getting into. The honesty of his disclosure touched her. Her relationship with Alex had been built on half-truths and omissions that had grown into outright lies. Nick's straightforward approach felt refreshingly different. "Thank you for telling me," she said, reaching across the table to take his hand. "I'm not scared off." Relief washed over his face. "Good, because I really like where this is going." After dinner, they walked to his car hand in hand. The night was cool and clear, the streets quiet. Vanessa felt content in a way she hadn't for years. "Would you like to come back to my place for coffee?" Nick asked as they reached his car. "No pressure, just coffee," Vanessa smiled. "I'd like that." At Nick's apartment, a modern one-bedroom in a secure building downtown, Vanessa finally turned her phone back on while he made coffee in the kitchen. Immediately, it buzzed with notification after notification. 6 missed calls and 4 voicemails, all from Alex. Her hand trembled as she put the phone to her ear to listen. The first message was angry enough, but each subsequent one grew more menacing, more unhinged. The final message sent a chill down her spine. "You can't hide from me forever. We need to finish this one way or another." Nick came in with 2 mugs of coffee and saw her face. "What's wrong?" She wordlessly handed him the phone and played the messages again. His expression darkened as he listened. "These are from tonight?" he asked when the messages ended. She nodded, fighting back tears. "I thought the restraining order would make him stop. I thought he'd eventually give up and move on." Nick set the coffee mugs down and sat beside her on the couch. "This isn't just harassment anymore, Vanessa. These are threats." He hesitated. "I don't want to overstep, but I think you should report this to the police immediately." "He is the police," she said, her voice breaking. "Or was. I heard he got suspended today." Nick's eyebrows shot up. "Suspended? Do you know why?" "My friend at the courthouse texted me. Apparently he violated department policies, but she didn't know the specifics." Vanessa wiped at her eyes. "I never wanted this. I just wanted him to leave me alone." Nick pulled her into a gentle embrace. "None of this is your fault. But I'm concerned about your safety. A suspension might push him over the edge, especially if he's drinking." "What should I do?" she asked, hating how scared she sounded. Nick thought for a moment. "First, we document these messages and report them. We'll go to the county sheriff, not the city police where he works. Second, you shouldn't be alone right now. You can stay here tonight if you'd like. I'll take the couch, or I can take you to a friend's place." His calm, methodical approach helped steady her rising panic. "Could I stay here? Just for tonight?" "Of course," he said without hesitation. "Whatever you need." While Vanessa used the bathroom to compose herself, Nick made a few quick phone calls. First to his supervisor at the FBI, giving a brief explanation of the situation, then to a contact at the sheriff's office to arrange a meeting first thing in the morning. When she returned, he had made up the couch with sheets and a blanket for himself and turned down the bed for her. "Thank you," she said softly. "For everything." "Try to get some rest," he replied. "We'll figure this out in the morning." But rest didn't come easily for either of them. Vanessa lay awake in Nick's bed, jumping at every sound from outside. Nick stayed alert on the couch, his FBI training keeping him vigilant even as exhaustion pulled at him. Across town, Alex had finally passed out on his couch, the empty whiskey bottle on the floor beside him. But his fitful sleep was filled with dreams of Vanessa with Nick, of his colleagues turning against him, of his life falling apart piece by piece. When he woke at dawn, head pounding and mouth dry, the anger that had been building for weeks had crystallized into something cold and dangerous. In his alcohol-addled mind, one thought stood out with perfect clarity. If he was going to lose everything anyway, he might as well confront Vanessa one last time. He stumbled to the bathroom, splashed water on his face, and stared at his reflection in the mirror. The man looking back was almost unrecognizable, hollow-eyed, unshaven, a shadow of the confident detective he'd once been. "This ends today," he whispered to his reflection. He rummaged through his closet until he found what he was looking for, a backup gun he kept hidden in a lockbox. He wasn't supposed to have it. All his weapons should have been surrendered when he was suspended, but he'd always kept this one off the books, just in case. As he loaded the gun with shaking hands, a small voice in the back of his mind screamed that this was wrong, that he was about to cross a line he could never uncross. But the voice was drowned out by the roaring in his ears, the certainty that he had nothing left to lose. He tucked the gun into his waistband, grabbed his car keys, and headed for the door. He would find Vanessa, make her listen, make her understand what she had done to him. And if that FBI agent tried to get in his way, well, Alex wasn't afraid of him. He had no way of knowing that by nightfall his life would be changed forever, and not in the way he imagined. Morning light filtered through the blinds of Nick's apartment. Vanessa sat at the kitchen counter, hands wrapped around a mug of coffee while Nick made a quick breakfast. Despite her fitful sleep, she felt safer than she had in weeks. "The sheriff can see us at 9, Nick said, sliding a plate of scrambled eggs in front of her. "I've already forwarded the voicemails to their office." Vanessa nodded, picking at her food without much appetite. "What happens next?" "They'll likely file additional charges for violating the restraining order. Given the threats and his access to weapons, they might even take him into custody." Nick sat beside her with his own plate. "This isn't just about protecting you anymore. He needs intervention before he hurts someone or himself." "I never thought it would come to this," she said quietly. "When we were together, he had a temper sometimes, but nothing like this." "Breakups can trigger underlying issues," Nick replied, "especially for someone whose identity is tied to control and authority." They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes before Vanessa spoke again. "I should get a change of clothes from my apartment before we go to the sheriff's office." Nick hesitated. "I'm not sure that's a good idea. What if Alex is watching your place?" "All my work clothes are there," she explained. "And my toothbrush, makeup. I can't just show up to file a police report looking like this." She gestured to her wrinkled outfit from the day before. Nick considered this. "Okay, but I'm coming with you. We'll be quick, in and out in 10 minutes. And I'm calling for a patrol car to meet us there, just to be safe." Across town, Alex was already in his car, parked a block from Vanessa's apartment building. He'd been there since dawn, watching the entrance, waiting, the gun pressed uncomfortably against his lower back where he'd tucked it into his waistband. His phone had been ringing periodically. Hector, Lieutenant Rivera, even the department psychiatrist. He ignored them all. Nothing mattered now except confronting Vanessa. Hours passed with no sign of her. Had she stayed somewhere else last night? The thought of her with Nick made his blood boil. He was about to give up and try her workplace when a car he didn't recognize pulled into the apartment complex parking lot. Alex sat up straight, suddenly alert. Through the windshield he could see Vanessa in the passenger seat. And driving was a man who matched the photos he'd seen. Nick Chen. "FBI agent, found you," Alex muttered, his hand instinctively moving toward his concealed weapon. He watched as they parked and walked toward the building entrance, Nick's hand resting lightly on the small of Vanessa's back. The casual intimacy of the gesture sent a fresh wave of rage through Alex. He got out of his car and followed at a distance, staying out of sight. Inside the apartment building, Vanessa unlocked her door with Nick close behind her. The place was exactly as she'd left it the night before, nothing out of place. "I'll just grab some things," she said, heading for the bedroom. "Won't take long." Nick nodded, staying in the living room but remaining vigilant. His eyes scanned the apartment, taking in details with professional assessment. The sturdy deadbolt on the front door, the fire escape accessible from the bedroom window, the layout that offered few hiding places. His FBI training kicked in automatically. "Any word on when that patrol car will arrive?" Vanessa called from the bedroom. "Should be here any minute," Nick replied. They had a unit nearby. Outside in the hallway, Alex had reached Vanessa's door. He could hear muffled voices inside. His heart pounded in his ears as adrenaline flooded his system. The rational part of his brain, the part that had made him a good detective once, screamed at him to walk away. But that voice was too quiet now, drowned out by jealousy and rage. He drew the gun from his waistband, holding it down by his side. Then, instead of knocking, he tried the door handle. It was locked, of course. Inside, Nick's phone buzzed with a text. "Patrol cars downstairs," he called to Vanessa. "Almost ready?" "Just one more minute," she replied, gathering toiletries in the bathroom. The sudden, aggressive pounding on the front door made them both freeze. "Vanessa, open up, I know you're in there." Alex's voice was slurred and angry. Nick immediately moved toward the bedroom. "Stay there," he whispered urgently to Vanessa. "Lock the bathroom door and call 911. She nodded, eyes wide with fear, and closed the bathroom door. Nick heard the lock click as he moved quietly back toward the front door, drawing his service weapon from his shoulder holster. "Police downstairs." "They've been notified," Nick called out, positioning himself to the side of the door rather than directly in front of it. There was a moment of silence, then Alex's voice again, calmer but somehow more menacing. "I just want to talk to Vanessa. Tell her to open the door." "That's not going to happen," Nick replied firmly. "The best thing you can do right now is leave. We can all talk this through properly later, with mediators present." Another pause, longer this time. Nick hoped Alex was considering his options, realizing he was outnumbered and outgunned. Then came the sound that every law enforcement officer dreads, a boot hitting the door near the lock. Once, twice, on the third kick, the doorframe splintered and the door flew open. Alex stumbled in, gun raised, eyes wild and bloodshot. When he saw Nick standing there with his own weapon drawn, he froze momentarily. "FBI, drop your weapon," Nick shouted, his voice commanding. "Drop it now!" But Alex's attention had shifted beyond Nick to the bedroom door. "Vanessa," he yelled. "Come out here!" "She's not coming out," Nick said, his tone level despite the racing of his heart. "And you need to put that gun down before this gets worse." "Shut up," Alex snarled, his gun now pointed directly at Nick. "This is between me and her. You're nothing. Just some fed who thinks he can take what's mine." Nick kept his weapon steady, aimed at Alex's center mass. His training had prepared him for standoffs, but the unpredictability of someone in Alex's state made this especially dangerous. "She's not yours," Nick said calmly. "She's her own person who made a choice. And right now, you're making choices that will destroy your life. Think about what you're doing." Something flickered in Alex's eyes, a moment of doubt perhaps, but then the bathroom door opened and Vanessa stepped out, phone in hand. "Alex, please," she said, her voice trembling. "Put the gun down. This isn't you." Alex's attention snapped to her and Nick tensed, ready to move if Alex shifted his aim toward Vanessa. "This is me now," Alex said bitterly. "This is what you turned me into." "No one did this to you," Vanessa replied, taking a cautious step forward despite Nick's warning glance. "You made your own choices, but it's not too late to make a different one." For a moment, the apartment was completely silent. The three of them formed a triangle of tension. Nick with his weapon trained on Alex, Alex's gun wavering between Nick and Vanessa standing halfway between the bedroom and living room. Unarmed, but somehow the most powerful presence in the room. Then Alex's face contorted with fresh anger. "You're just like everyone else. Thinking you're better than me. Judging me." His grip on the gun tightened and he took a step toward Vanessa. "If I can't have you, then—" Nick moved instantly, stepping between them. "Federal agent, drop your weapon now." In one fluid motion, he pulled his FBI credentials from his pocket with his left hand while keeping his gun aimed with his right. The badge caught the light as it flipped open, the gold emblem and Federal Bureau of Investigation clearly visible. The sight of the official credentials seemed to penetrate Alex's rage-fogged brain. For the first time, he looked uncertain. "Last warning," Nick said, his voice steady and authoritative. "Put the gun down or I will fire." The wail of sirens from outside grew louder. The patrol car had arrived. The sound seemed to bring Alex back to reality, if only partially. His hand trembled, the gun dipping slightly. "It's over." "Alex," Vanessa said softly from behind Nick. "Please don't make it worse." Time seemed to stretch as Alex stood there, swaying slightly, the gun still in his hand. Nick remained perfectly still, his aim unwavering, prepared to pull the trigger if necessary. Finally, Alex's shoulders slumped. The gun lowered to his side. "On your knees," Nick commanded. "Drop the weapon and put your hands behind your head." To everyone's relief, Alex complied, the gun clattering to the floor. Nick kicked it away while maintaining his aim at Alex. "Hands behind your head," he repeated. As Alex interlaced his fingers behind his head, heavy footsteps pounded up the stairs. Two uniformed officers appeared in the doorway, weapons drawn. "FBI," Nick identified himself immediately. "Suspect is armed but subdued." Weapon on the floor. The officers moved in efficiently, handcuffing Alex while Nick kept his gun trained on him. Only when Alex was fully secured did Nick finally lower his weapon. Vanessa stood frozen, watching as the officers read Alex his rights. His eyes found hers one last time as they led him away. Not angry anymore, just hollow and lost. When they were gone, Nick holstered his weapon and turned to Vanessa. Without a word, she stepped into his arms, her whole body shaking with delayed shock and relief. "It's over," Nick murmured, holding her close. "You're safe now." But even as he said it, Both of them knew that the aftermath of such a confrontation was just beginning. There would be statements to give, charges to file, court appearances to make. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. For now, though, in the quiet of her apartment with the danger finally past, they allowed themselves to simply breathe together, alive, and looking toward a future that suddenly seemed possible again. 3 months had passed since that day in Vanessa's apartment. The cherry trees outside the courthouse had shed their blossoms, giving way to the deep green leaves of summer. Vanessa sat on a bench in the shade, checking her watch. The hearing was scheduled to start in 20 minutes. This wasn't the first time she'd been to court because of Alex. The initial arraignment, bail hearings, and preliminary proceedings had all required her presence. But today felt different. Today would bring a kind of closure. "Sorry I'm late," Nick said, approaching with 2 coffee cups. He wore a crisp navy suit and looked every bit the federal agent he was, though he'd left his badge and gun at the office. Line was longer than expected. Vanessa accepted the coffee gratefully. "Thanks. I was starting to get nervous sitting out here alone." Nick settled beside her on the bench. "How are you feeling about today?" She considered the question, taking a sip of her coffee before answering. "Ready for it to be over. But also, sad, I guess." Nick nodded, understanding in his eyes. Despite everything Alex had done, there was still a complicated grief in watching someone she had once loved destroy his life so completely. "Your testimony will be straightforward," Nick assured her. "Just tell the truth exactly as it happened. The evidence speaks for itself." The evidence was indeed overwhelming. Beyond the incident with the gun, investigations had revealed Alex's illegal use of police databases, his harassment, and numerous violations of the restraining order. What had started as a suspension had escalated to criminal charges: stalking, breaking and entering, unlawful possession of a firearm, assault with a deadly weapon, and more. The door to the courthouse opened, and Hector, Alex's former partner, emerged, looking around until he spotted them. "Thought I might find you out here," he said, approaching cautiously. "Mind if I join you for a minute?" Vanessa gestured to the space beside her. "How is he?" she asked after Hector sat down. Hector sighed heavily. "Accepting reality, finally. The lawyer got him to agree to the plea deal. 5 years with possibility of parole after 3, mandatory counseling, permanent loss of his law enforcement credentials." The news brought a complex wave of emotions for Vanessa. Relief that there would be no trial, that she wouldn't have to face Alex directly in court, sadness for the waste of potential, a strange sense of justice that didn't feel entirely satisfying. "I still can't believe it went so far," Hector continued, shaking his head. "I knew he was struggling after you two split, but I never thought—" "None of us did," Vanessa said quietly. After a moment of silence, Hector turned to Nick. "The department wants me to thank you. If things had gone differently that day—" Nick waved away the implied gratitude. "I was just doing my job." He glanced at Vanessa with a softness in his eyes that contradicted his words. It had been far more than just a job. "Well, I should get back inside," Hector said, standing. "The hearing starts soon. Just wanted to let you know about the plea deal so you'd be prepared." As he walked away, Vanessa leaned against Nick's shoulder. 5 years, she murmured. "It doesn't seem real. The important thing is that he'll get help," Nick replied. "And you can finally move forward without looking over your shoulder." Inside the courtroom 30 minutes later, Vanessa sat in the gallery with Nick beside her as the judge accepted Alex's guilty plea. When Alex was brought in wearing an orange jumpsuit, handcuffed and escorted by officers, she barely recognized him. He was thinner, paler, his once confident posture now slumped and defeated. He didn't look at the gallery, keeping his eyes fixed on the judge or the floor. His responses were quiet but clear as he formally accepted the consequences of his actions. Only at the very end, as he was being led away, did his eyes finally sweep across the courtroom and land briefly on Vanessa. There was no anger there anymore, just a profound sadness and perhaps a flicker of remorse. Then he was gone, the door closing behind him with a heavy finality. Outside after the hearing, Vanessa took a deep breath of the warm summer air, feeling as though a weight had been lifted. "Want to grab lunch?" Nick asked. "Or would you rather go home?" "Actually," she said, "I'd like to walk for a bit, if that's okay." They strolled through the park adjacent to the courthouse, neither speaking for a while, just processing the morning's events. I've been thinking about taking that job in Denver, Vanessa finally said. She'd been offered a position at a law firm there, a step up from her courthouse job with better pay and more responsibility. Nick nodded, his expression carefully neutral. It's a great opportunity. But I'm not going to take it, she continued. He stopped walking, turning to face her. You're not? Vanessa shook her head. For a while I thought I needed to leave this place, start completely fresh somewhere new. But then I realized I was still letting what happened with Alex dictate my choices. Running away isn't the same as moving forward. Relief washed over Nick's face. I'm glad. Selfishly glad, I admit. Over the past 3 months, their relationship had deepened beyond either of their expectations. What had begun in crisis had transformed into something solid and nurturing. Besides, she added with a small smile, I heard a rumor that a certain FBI agent might be in line for a promotion that would keep him stationed here for the foreseeable future. Nick laughed. Where did you hear that? It's supposed. Ed to be confidential until next week. I still have friends at the courthouse, she replied with a teasing shrug. They hear things. They continued walking, fingers intertwined, discussing dinner plans and weekend possibilities. Normal, everyday conversations that once seemed impossible during those dark days of Alex's escalating behavior. That evening, they visited the newly opened restaurant they'd been wanting to try. The place was busy, the atmosphere lively with conversation and laughter. As they studied their menus, Nick's phone buzzed with a work message. Everything okay? Vanessa asked, noticing his expression change as he read it. Just work, he assured her. Nothing urgent. He put the phone away, giving her his full attention. So what looks good to you? As they enjoyed their meal, talking about everything and nothing, Vanessa found herself struck by the simple joy of the moment. There had been a time not so long ago when such ordinary happiness seemed beyond reach, when fear had been her constant companion. Later that night at Nick's apartment, which had gradually become their apartment over the past months, Vanessa stood at the window, looking out at the city lights. Nick joined her, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Penny for your thoughts, he said softly. I was thinking about choices, she replied, leaning back against him. How one decision can change everything. Like breaking up with Alex? She shook her head. No, like deciding not to let fear win. Like walking into that coffee shop the day we met, even though I was terrified of running into Alex. Like reporting the harassment instead of just enduring it. Like staying here instead of running to Denver. Nick tightened his embrace slightly. Brave choices. Necessary ones, she corrected. For a long time I felt like a victim. Even before the incident with the gun. Even before the restraining order. I let myself believe I didn't have control over my own life. She turned in his arms to face him. I'm done with that. Good, he said simply, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Because you're the strongest person I know. 6 months later, on a crisp autumn day, Vanessa stood outside the prison where Alex was serving his sentence. She'd debated for weeks whether to accept his request for a visit, ultimately deciding it was a necessary step in her own healing process. Nick had offered to come with her, but this was something she needed to do alone. Inside, sitting across from Alex in the visitation room, the contrast between their current reality and their shared past couldn't have been more stark. The man before her was sober, clear-eyed, a shadow of his former self, but somehow more present than he'd been in those final volatile months of their relationship. Thank you for coming, he said, his voice quiet. I wasn't sure you would. I wasn't either, she admitted. I've been in therapy, he told her. Twice a week. Trying to understand why I did what I did. Not to excuse it, but to make sure I never do anything like that again. Vanessa nodded, neither offering forgiveness nor rejecting his efforts at redemption. Both would have been premature. I don't expect you to forgive me, he continued as if reading her thoughts. I just wanted to tell you face to face that I'm sorry. For everything. You deserved better. Yes, she agreed simply. I did. They talked for 20 minutes, not about reconciliation or friendship, but about accountability and consequences. When the guard indicated their time was up, Vanessa stood to leave. Are you happy? Alex asked suddenly. With him? Vanessa considered the question not out of uncertainty, but because she wanted her answer to be truthful. I'm happy with myself, she said finally. And yes, Nick is a part of that happiness. Alex nodded, accepting her answer without bitterness. Good. That's good. As Vanessa walked out of the prison into the bright autumn sunshine, she felt the last piece of a long, complicated chapter of her life finally close. Ahead in the parking lot, she could see Nick leaning against his car, waiting patiently as promised. She took a deep breath of the cool, fresh air and began walking toward her future, stronger, wiser, and finally free from the shadows of the past.